Start.
Let's ready to start.
Yes, that's what we have.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming on this this rainy Sunday afternoon. My name is Eric Haskell. I chair the Hingham Republican Town Committee, and for those of you who have attended this event before, you know that it is our pleasure every year to bring together all of the candidates that are running for the different town offices in the spring election. For those of you who haven't attended this event before, it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you for coming. In the way of format this afternoon, what we're going to do is go office by office, starting with the Board of Assessors, then the School Committee, then the Selectmen, then the Recreation Commission, and then the Planning Board. Within each office, we're going to invite the candidates to come up to the podium one by one and each give a 2-minute opening statement. And then the candidates will take their seats and accept questions from the audience or from the podium, depending on how it goes. Jerry here in the front row is going to be keeping time, so when he flashes you a little sign, you know time is beginning to wind down. He also has a buzzer, although he promises me he doesn't want to use it.
I'm not sure about that.
And for folks asking questions from the audience, you can either use this mic over here, which loops back into the HCAM camera system, or if you just want to speak from your seat, I can repeat the question into the mic up here so that the camera catches it. So, unless anybody has any questions about the process, I will welcome our first candidate for Board of Assessors, a 27-year veteran of that body, Greg Hall.
You gotta wonder why I keep doing this. but I've got a string of figures here. My wife informed me the figures make people happy and go to sleep. But anyhow, I want to start by saying the Board of Selectmen does not have an I in it. I cannot make a decision. I can make a recommendation, and I can be downvoted. But it better not happen very often. Anyhow, that's the way we operate. We operate, in the 27 years I've been on the Board of Assessors, and I've got a string of figures here that would drive anybody crazy, and I'm going to summarize it by saying, in the 27 years I've been on the Board of Directors, the voting population has grown 25%. The number of parcels subject to tax paying has increased 37%. And the tax rate in 1987 was $12.10. In 2014, it was $12.56. The revenue in 1987 was $17,243,000. The revenue in 2047 will be $73,065,400, an increase of 410% over 1987. The revenue has increased 428% in that time. And that is done by if you read your last year's budget, out of the $80 million budget, the assessor's office was afforded $292,000, which if you take out your calculator is about 0.003%. And for that, we are expected to put on 76 to 80% of the revenue of the town, and we get it done. That's about all I can tell you about the job of being assessor. It's a lot of figures which would bore you, and I'll be willing to answer any questions later on. I think that sums it up pretty well. That's why I enjoy the job, is watching Hingham grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I will be happy to ask the first question. Greg, what do you see as challenges or new priorities that are on the radar screen for the Board of Assessors for the next 3 years?
Is this hot?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, one thing we do have a committee looking into the question of the split rate between the commercial, industrial, and real estate. And that is something I don't care to go into, but if somebody wants the figures, I'll give it to them. We have about 10% commercial industrial in the town of Hingham. And to do the maximum split to evaluate for the residential to save them money, if we 50% increase the tax rate for the commercial industrial, the tax rate, the tax saving to the average house in Hingham would be $596, and the increase to an industrial would be $9,232, and that's why we pretty much stick to a split, a single rate.
Yes, Jerry.
Greg, could you tell us the new FEMA flood maps have been in the news a lot lately?
No, I can't.
Yeah, let's say theoretically somebody's property got shifted to within some of these flood zones. How would that impact their property assessment?
And the question was how shifting a given property to one of these new FEMA flood zones would affect the assessment.
It's too soon to tell right now. We're doing the same thing here that we did when the railroad went through. Until we find out how it affects the value of the property, we're sticking with the way we're doing it. The railroad, it didn't affect the properties on North and South Street. We don't know what it's going to do. I've got a house under agreement in the flood zone right now, and we're waiting to see what happens on that. Next question.
Any other questions for Greg Hall, candidate for Board of Assessors? All right, Greg, thank you for joining us this afternoon. The next office that we're going to hear from is School Committee. There are 2 seats up for School Committee this year, and there are 2 candidates for those 2 seats, Carol Falvey and Dr. Edward Schreier. Only Dr. Schreier was able to join us this afternoon, so I welcome him to the podium to make an opening statement.
Thank you. I'm Ed Schreier, and I'm a candidate for re-election to a 3-year term on the school committee. Carol Falvey, my co-member, had a previous commitment, and I should point out that I've enjoyed working with her and look forward to working with her in the future. My wife Joyce and I have lived in Hingham for 37 years. Our 2 daughters were educated in the Hingham public school system. Rachel graduated in '89, and Emily class of '93. I am a pediatric dentist with a practice limited to children, adolescents, and those with special needs. The past 3 years have been a learning experience for me, and during that period, I have served on the Community Outreach Committee Subcommittee for 2 years, Long Range Planning for 1 year, Chairman of the Ad Hoc Field Subcommittee for 1 year, the Vice Chairman of the Ad Hoc Field Subcommittee for 1 year, Special Education Subcommittee for 3 years, Chairman for 2, Representative to the South School Council for 3 years, Representative to the CPAC 3 years, Special Education Parents Group, ex officio to the Special Education Funding Workshop, and the High School Field Oversight Subcommittee. I'm proud to have helped with the development of the middle school and the realization of the high school athletic field project. Next term, I will continue my commitment to the special needs cohort of our school population, utilizing my 40 years plus experience working with special needs kids and their families. I also plan to focus on the capital repairs of our buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schreier. Any questions for Dr. Schreier from the audience? Yes.
Are there any issues that the school committee has with the Common Core?
And the question was whether the school committee has any issues with the Common Core standards.
Well, the Common Core Standards is a national program, directive, that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, along with 45 or 46 states, signed up to participate in. The question is, does the school committee have any issues? And of course, the issue is always cost. So that would be my answer.
Let me follow
We
up
don't
on
have a
that.
whole lot of choices, to be blunt about it.
Can you elaborate on both of those points? What specifically is the cost issue that comes with Common Core, and why do you feel that the school committee doesn't have a choice in the matter?
The Commonwealth of Massachusetts chose to participate in this national program, national directive with the present administration in Washington, And in so doing, the state received funds, so you're in. Now, if you're in, you have to go by the rules and participate, and the term is unfunded mandates, and that was what I meant by the cost.
Any other questions? Yes, Al.
What is your feeling, Dr. Schreier, on all-day kindergarten? And if you're in favor, how should that be funded? Taxes or private pay?
The question was about support for all-day kindergarten and how such a program would be funded.
The issue, the question of an all-day kindergarten has been brought up in the past. Historically, before my first term on the school committee, it was the issue, as I understand it, was put on a back burner with the cost of the East Elementary School project. This continues to be an issue that is something that it will be dealt with as we go forward. The question becomes, from an educational point of view, I am absolutely in favor of an all-day kindergarten program. But Mr. Chambers asked me a question about the cost, and I have mixed feelings on that. I have personal experience with the Milton Public School System. Frankly, my older daughter lives there with kids in school, and in Milton, it's my understanding that the program works very, very well, and it's a pay-to-play. So if I had to vote on it tonight, I would say that I'm in favor of a tuition for an all-day kindergarten.
Are there other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Schreier, for joining us this afternoon. Because it seems on topic, I ought to take a moment now, and I'll also make an announcement at the end of this meeting. The Hingham Republican Town Committee, our next regular meeting is actually going to be specifically focused on the Common Core issue that one of the questions just raised. We're going to be hosting Jim Sturgis, who's the executive director of the Pioneer Institute in Boston. Pioneer, of course, is a think tank that focuses on Massachusetts education-related issues, and Mr. Sturgis is going to be speaking to us about Common Core and what it is, where it's going, and what it has done so far to the education curriculum statewide in Massachusetts. That meeting, for anybody interested in joining us, it's open to the public. You are more than welcome to join us. It's Sunday evening, April 27th, at 7 o'clock at the 99 Restaurant on Route 3A. That's 428 Lincoln Street. Again, Jim Sturgis from the Pioneer Institute, and I'll make another announcement at the end of this meeting. Our next candidates are the two candidates for Board of Selectmen. There's one seat up this year and two candidates running, Jonathan Asher and Paul Gannon. We'll go alphabetically, so Mr. Asher, please join us at the podium.
Great, thank you very much. My name is John Asher. I grew up in Rhinebeck, New York, graduated from Colgate University with high honors in mathematics, and subsequently earned a Master of Science degree in management from American University. I served as an officer in the U.S. Naval Security Group during the Vietnam conflict, and I retired from IBM after a career running the professional services organization in the Mid-Atlantic area. After retiring from IBM, I was an officer in two other companies, and I have managed revenue-producing operations in excess of $200 million a year. My wife Isabel and I moved to Hingham in 1997. Once I stopped being a road warrior, I filled out a talent bank application and was appointed to the Capital Outlay Committee in 2006, and I served on Capital Outlay for 3 years. I was appointed to the Advisory Committee in 2007 and chaired the Advisory Committee in 2011-2012, after which I was asked to sit on the Water Company Acquisition Study Committee, which I have chaired since 2012. I'm also the treasurer of the town's Veterans Council. I'm running for selectman because I believe that each of us, as much as we're able, has the obligation to pay forward the benefits that we currently enjoy from those that have gone before. I think my in-depth knowledge of the town's budget and business processes would enable me to be a good partner in terms of continuing the delivery of the high-caliber services and educational opportunities that we've all come to enjoy and to expect, but also with focus on affordability. And so I would be very much focused on the continued development of the South Shore Park commercially, because to continue to pay for the services we enjoy, I'm looking to have a greater component of commercial revenue, which would be derived by South Shore Park development. The model that I see would be the South Shore Hospital Bone and Muscle Center, which we attracted to Hingham a couple of years ago and now contributes over $200,000 a year of commercial property tax revenue. Thank you.
And our second candidate for selectman is Paul Gannon. Please welcome him to the podium.
Thank you, Eric, and I want to thank the Republican Town Committee for inviting us all here tonight to speak. It's hopefully a service to those who are watching on TV. And I want to thank everybody that came in person as well, taking time out of your day and not so good of a day out there to come by and listen to us, so thank you. So I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. Some of you folks have met me before, and I've been here before and spoken before the committee. I grew up in South Boston, Massachusetts, and lived there most of my life. I went to a school called Don Bosco Technical High School with a lot of folks from the city, and a lot of the folks are down this way now. They've moved down to the Hingham area, so it's quite nice. And after that, I was at Providence College, and unfortunately, our team lost yesterday in the NCAA regionals, but there's always hope for next year. And after that, I went up going to law school down in Washington, D.C., which was a great experience. I was down at Catholic University. I received my degree from Catholic University. When I came back home, I immediately became involved in community activities where I was living. I was coaching kids because I was trying to give back, and get involved in the community groups where I lived. And I also was appointed an assistant district attorney in Suffolk County, which is a job I love to do. And I worked with law enforcement and state and local levels, trying to protect victims of violent crime and domestic abuse, and actually, obviously, doing a whole lot more than that and trying to keep drugs off the street and keep people safe. And it was a very enjoyable few years, and then I had an opportunity in 1990 to run for state representative, and I was elected to be a state representative in 4th Suffolk District in Suffolk County. And I tell you that I see a lot of parallels from that job and the job I'm looking to do now. As a state representative, I fought hard for a lot of issues that are affecting my neighbors. It included law enforcement issues, elderly issues, taxes, and education. So I see a lot of parallels. Probably the best thing that's happened to me in my life is my wife Susan and I, we're married, and we have 2 wonderful daughters. And they're both high school students at Hingham High School. And I'm told the time is up, so hopefully I can tell you a little bit more about myself and why I want to run in the next round of questions. Thank you.
Questions from the audience for Mr. Asher and Mr. Gannon running for selectman. Yes, Tally.
Especially for John, who's been on the water committee, do you think the town should buy the water committee, and what's its impact?
Okay, do I think the town should buy the water company, and what's its impact? I think what the town should do is what the committee has recommended so far to the Board of Selectmen and actually endorsed with the presentation of an article for town meeting consideration this year, which is to continue the study of the feasibility and advisability of buying the water company. I think that's the best course of action. It would be premature to make a decision at this point in the absence of a purchase price that's either been negotiated or determined through adjudication. And so on that basis, I would say the committee, looking at the data and not advocating any position really, just following the data, I think recommends that the study be continued, but premature to make a decision about purchase.
Paul Gannon, about the potential acquisition of the water company.
Thank you for the question. I'm not on the commission, and that poses a distinct disadvantage in the sense that a lot of the activity that has taken place has been taking place in executive session for reasons that may or may not be proven. So I'm not really aware of all the pluses and minuses. I've been at a couple of meetings, and there were a lot of issues raised, and John may know better than I because he's sitting in these executive sessions, but there's all kinds of questions about whether the water supply is going to be sufficient for us in the future. What are we buying into? I know that we just did a reserve fund transfer of I forget the exact figure, but I think it was $200,000. And then at the town committee, so we're getting close to $1 million spent on something. And my only concern about that is that I'd like to know more. And I know there's a forum that's been proposed with the Board of Selectmen. It's supposed to take place before the town meeting. I hope that takes place, and I hope that everybody can come out and listen and find out.
Other questions? Yes.
I have a question for Paul Gannon. I know he ran 2 years ago for the school committee and has been there for it's a 3-year term, and he's been there for 2 years and is now deciding to leave that commitment. And I watched the March 10th school committee meeting where they were discussing the budget changes, where the advisory and the selectmen had put forward to decrease the FTEs that had been requested by the school committee to 3 instead of 6 new employees. And he seems to be struggling with the concept of what that meant to the school budget. So when you look at an almost $100 million budget for the town and the increase of public safety and town employees and public works and whatnot, I wonder 2 things. Why he's not fulfilling the commitment to the townspeople for the 3-year term on the school committee. And secondly, how he feels his experience will be able to help him with the increased budget, which is almost double what the school committee budget is from the town moving forward.
And again, the question specifically for Paul Gannon was why he's running for selectman right now, partway through his term on the school committee, and also how his experience on the school committee translates to budgetary work as a potential member of the Board of Selectmen. Paul.
Thank you. Beth, thank you, and I appreciate your confidence in the fact that I may be leaving soon from my position, because that would mean I'm going to get elected, so thank you very much for that thought. But you are mistaken that I struggled with anything to do with that, and I know Laura Marwell is the subcommittee chair for advisory, and the reason why I was focused on that is because I wanted all of the teachers in the mix, and the advisory recommended 3 of the 6. And I will say this, that I've never heard a more impassioned speech from a woman from the adjustment counselors saying how they were underfunded and understaffed, and how important it was for us to make sure that our kids are safe in those schools. And that's what the adjustment counselors do. So I wasn't struggling with the numbers, because I was a legislator where our budget dwarfed the town of Hingham, and it dwarfed exponentially the school committee's budget. So I know we don't know each other that well, but I wasn't struggling. What I was getting emotional about was that I sensed that we really needed the money, and I was hoping that we could find the money. And what advisory did is they said, you pick the 3 of the 6. And we made a commitment that night, Ed Schreier and I and the other members of the committee, that we were going to protect our kids and provide the funding for those counselors no matter what. And so we'll find the money if we can, if we put them all in there. If it was all of our choices, if the money was there, which it isn't every year, we would make sure that we had more teachers, because we're not back to the levels that we were before the recession, and we're all trying to get there. But thank you for the question, Beth.
Yes, question in the back.
I have a question for the selectmen candidates. How much money are each of you willing to spend, or would like the town to spend, on studying whether we should buy that?
And the question was, how much money are each of the selectmen candidates willing to authorize spending to study the potential acquisition of the waterworks? John Asher, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My answer would be that I would recommend that the town proceed and approve the article that will be presented at town meeting for the additional $475,000 of the study. Basically, when you look at the numbers and sort of evaluate risk versus reward, the possibility, again, predicated upon purchase price of the water company, is that the town could eliminate tens of millions of dollars of cost that would really enable accelerated improvement of the transmission and distribution system infrastructure, and possibly even moderation of rates going forward for water ratepayers. So I think there's a risk-reward equation that has me believing that the proper course of action, the recommended course of action, would be proceed with the study and see if in fact we get a price that would warrant further consideration by town meeting.
And I'm sorry, John, before we move on to allow Paul to speak to that question, since you're obviously involved in these issues in your role with the Water Study Committee, can you give the folks in the audience, both in the room and at home, an update on what the current status is as to determining the potential acquisition price of the waterworks?
Sure. Right now, the case is being heard in the Superior Court, Suffolk County Superior Court Business Litigation Session, which is a court especially established to address complex business issues like this. The first hearing of which was last October. The second conference was due to have been conducted a week ago, but was postponed until April 9th as a result of a death in the family of Aquarian's attorney. So we will have a conference with the judge in the business litigation session on April 9th, who will evaluate progress of both parties in terms of all the work associated with the scheduling order issued by the court on October 22nd. And at that point, we'll see what results in terms of additional scheduling going forward.
Paul.
Thank you. I have some misgivings and reservations about spending a lot of money chasing this thing down because, one, I don't know enough about it because, I'm just repeating myself, there's been a lot of the proceedings have been in executive session, so there's the sense of the transparency. I don't have all the answers, and I say this respectfully. I think John knows more than I in the sense that he's in those meetings, but I think everybody should be able to make their own decisions. And I think we've gone beyond the feasibility study that was initially funded, because now we're in litigation, as John said, and that's costing a lot of money to hire attorneys and to pay for them. So I'm really hoping we have a forum in the next few weeks so that we can get some answers and so people can make their own decisions.
Could I respond to the remark made about the executive sessions? I would just recommend to everybody that if you go to the town website and look at the Water Company Acquisition Study Committee pages, you will see hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents, all the minutes of our meetings that have been approved so far. There's a great deal of information, and in fact, a number of the committee members have volunteered when folks have questions to sit down with them and walk them through the detail as much as they would like to have
May I
it.
just follow up one quick comment?
Paul Gannon, certainly.
And I do appreciate that there's probably hundreds of pages, but there's probably thousands of pages that we don't have access to. And I was told, and I know there's been articles in the paper, that the discovery process isn't done yet, and that's why they're in executive session. That may or may not be the right answer or the good answer, but there is still a lot of information, a lot of discussion, a lot of detail that we don't have yet. So I'm not blaming John Asher for that. I'm saying is that the question is about Aquarian and what do I think? I don't have enough information, and I'd like a lot more information. I think everybody else would too.
Yes, in the back.
Hi, Paul. This is a question for Paul Gannon.
Hi, Sue.
How are you?
Good.
We've, Paul, I like you, we've worked together before, but I have a lot of concerns about the amount of time you have and maybe a commitment to the position. A few minutes ago, you said that there needs to be a town forum, and you hoped that there would be one before a town meeting. There was one, Paul. It was 3 weeks ago, and they laid out very clearly for everyone that was there at Town Hall in the auditorium the breakdown of why, at this point in time, the committee is looking at, and all the scenarios of if we had to pay this amount, if we had to pay that amount, and all that sort of thing. It was really, because I was someone who wasn't sure where I was as far as spending the additional money. And they did lay it out. They laid it out right there, very, very clearly. I think that's also, that was televised as well. There have also been 3 or 4 meetings with the water company and not only the water company, but the Weir River Estuary Committee and all, that have clearly, been talking about how much water we have going forward and what our threshold is over the next 10, 15, 20 years or so. And I guess that's the kind of thing I look at. There are a lot of people that are working on this and have been in a lot of these meetings, but you haven't been. And I really just want to, you're running for one of the top positions. We really, I don't know if you've got the time, and I'd like you to answer that. And time and commitment. Sure.
And the question was to Paul Gannon to speak to his time and ability to commit to the office of serving as a selectman.
And so, I'm happy that you're here today, and if you had concerns about me running and my time, I did reach out to you a couple weeks ago, and I never heard back from you. So I wish you maybe would have, raised that preliminarily, and I would have told you, as I'll tell everybody here, I have the time. I have more energy than any candidate in this race. I've done this in the legislature and held down a full-time job. I can do the job. So you raising it at this forum, I have some concern about that.
How did you reach out to me, Paul?
I emailed you.
On my email?
You're linked in with me, Sue, and I reached out to you because that's the only way I could get. I looked your phone number up, not to digress, but I left you a message. If you didn't get it, that's okay. But you know where I live. You can always come see me and talk to me if you had concerns, because I think that's a bit disingenuous to tell me that you don't think I have the time. I've been at meetings on this that I haven't seen you. So guess what? We're all working together to make this a better town. But the bottom line is, I've been at meetings, Susan, is what I'm trying to tell you. I've been at meetings on this issue. There's a request, not the forum that you're speaking of, so I don't want anybody to get confused. I understand there was a forum, but the selectmen voted, and I shouldn't say voted, agreed to hold a forum with the Aquarian folks. I saw documentation recently. They've requested 2 dates to have it in the month of April. Now, so if the selectmen have said they would hold it, I just want to make sure they do, because if you read the papers, if you talk to people, the explanation that why people aren't being given all the information, even if they're at the meetings, they're not being given all the information, and why they're in executive session is because discovery's not complete, so they can't divulge the information because it's in litigation. So you're not getting all the information either, Susan. So don't worry, you've known me, I think, a long time. I can handle the job. I wouldn't do it if I couldn't handle it. I don't go into something unless I give it 100%. And so I don't want you or anyone else to think that I can't do the job. And I do take a little offense at that, because that's just not even close to the truth.
Thank you, Paul. I have a question from the podium up here. And in the interest of disclosure, the town committee that has proposed these 2 articles, I actually participate as a member of. There are going to be 2 articles on the warrant for this town meeting concerning the possibility of using little electronic handheld devices to conduct votes, particularly contentious or potentially close votes at town meeting. Like the waterworks issue, the electronic voting issue is going to be the subject of a public hearing on Wednesday, April 16th at 7 o'clock at Town Hall, and we're looking forward to hearing everybody's reaction to it at that time. But I wanted to see if both of you, as candidates, have positions on the issue of using electronic handheld voting devices at town meeting. John, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you. First, let me just respond to a remark that Paul made in terms of information available. I would just say that the reason that the committee has gone into executive session, as I'm sure Paul's aware, is under the Massachusetts open meeting laws to make sure that the town's legal strategy and position are not weakened by public discussion when a matter is underway. In terms of information that is needed or that you'd like to know more about, I'd say we'd be happy to sit down and do what we've done with others, which is to walk you through in excruciating detail, potentially, the the dynamics financially and otherwise associated with the evaluation of the study so far. So now back to electronic voting. I was actually attending the Government Study Committee when this issue was first surfaced, and do see the merits of it in terms of perhaps running quicker town meetings, eliminating uncertainty in terms of voice votes. The concern that I had, which I did express to Edna, that I know is involved in this committee as well, was cost. And my understanding is that now there is another vendor who apparently is looking to make inroads in the business here in New England, Massachusetts particularly, where potentially a pilot would be the next step for, I guess, the sum of about $15,000. That, to me, sounds worth pursuing, and so I would support that.
Paul Gannon, electronic voting at town meetings.
Sure. And I thank you for being involved in the process in terms of this issue, because there's pluses and minuses to everything. I mean, you know, John mentioned the cost. Yeah, I think there's a cost, but I know that there's a lot of families that try to go to these meetings, and sometimes they last over several days, and the voting process can be tedious and it can be long. And I will tell you that if having electronic voting keeps people involved in the process, maybe brings more people out, allows them to have some time with their families over these periods of time, because I know people work hard and they have obligations, I'd be in favor of at least giving it a shot. And the only other thing I'll say is, if I can just respond to John's comment, and I appreciate that, you know, and of course, if you're on the commission and I'm a selectman, I'm going to be working closely with you on that issue. So that's great. But I will tell you, I was at a recent Board of Selectmen meeting, and there seemed to be so many questions, and the selectmen at the time, and not that they could maybe, because maybe there's executive session, but there were a lot of answers that weren't given. And it was basically, my understanding is that after Discovery's over, sometime in April, that people are going to know more. And so, you know, we're funding these things. It's getting up to be $1 million. I have concerns, and that's all. And I think a forum would be helpful. And I'm told that the selectmen agreed to hold it. So I'm looking forward to that forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions for the candidates for selectmen? Yeah, Al Chambers.
I think it's a great town. I think it's extremely well run. I think thanks to the talent and brightness of the many people that step up and run for positions like this, I think the town has planned its activities well. There's one area that bothers me that's absolutely out of control, and that is our exposure to 40B development against the best interest of the town. I wondered if each of you would just give me your thoughts on that, and like to add, just for my own personal pleasure, I think we should be a lot tougher on our delinquent taxpayers and take land out of play that hasn't had taxes paid on it for years.
So the question was around each candidate's position with respect to 40B development in the town. Paul Gannon, let's start with you.
Thank you, Al. So I think everybody probably understands the 40B process, but just so the folks that are watching, my understanding is that you can bypass local zoning unless and until the town has 10% of their housing stock that is affordable. And from what I understand, from following the process along with other projects, that the town's position has been consistently that we do have the 10%, and there'll be no need for any additional housing. So if that is the case, then obviously I would be supportive of that scenario where we don't need to build anymore. Having said that, I understand that the appeal process hasn't been as kind to us in some of the projects. So I think that the boards that are involved right now, because there's a project on Main Street, as you're probably all aware of, are doing a very good job in trying to make sure we get the best out of the project. Obviously, the town has other options, as they did with other projects, and I'd keep my options wide open to look out for the best interests of the town.
John Asher?
Well, I think in terms of the appeal process, if I were handicapping what the state is likely to decide, I'd say the likelihood of a decision that Hingham has met or surpassed the 10% threshold is unlikely. So I think we're handcuffed to some extent in that regard, as you know, Al, in terms of the authority of the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals relative to 40Bs. I think the best model that I see is what the previous boards of selectmen have done, which is what are called friendly 40Bs, where you buy a plot of land, work with a developer, and develop housing that meets the needs of affordability, but does it in a way that is more in keeping with density and architecture that really make Hingham the special place that it is. I think secondarily, last year's acquisition of Recreation Park Drive for a number of purposes, but one of them is to prevent the development of high-density housing, and I would support that continued strategy going forward as the town can afford to do it.
Yes, sir.
Jack Rayburn, Main Street, Hingham. The first question for Mr. Gannon was, why have you not completed, or why aren't you completing your term on the school committee? Perhaps it's my old ears, but I didn't hear an answer. Would you please?
Absolutely, and I apologize because I know it was like a multi-level question, and I tried to address it. Well, bottom line is that there's no requirement for me to do that. There's an opportunity, there's an open seat, and I felt that I could do a lot more for the town on the Board of Selectmen because they involve veteran issues, elderly issues, tax issues, school issues, and I feel based on my experience as a former law enforcement person, a member of the legislature, and a resident of the town, I have every right to run for an open seat. And if I do win, then there'll be some other volunteer that'll serve the school committee well. They won't be without a school committee person. So I'm comfortable with that scenario.
May I respond, please?
Sure.
First, John Asher, any comment on this issue?
No, it's not my, not my decision.
Yes.
Mr. Gannon used words like requirement and his privilege or his right. That is fine, but you still didn't answer the question intellectually. Why are you leaving the school committee?
Okay. Well, most respectfully to you, I intellectually did answer it because I made a personal decision. I'm a human being who wants to serve this town. It's as simple as that. So if I want to do something on a higher level that I think I'm capable of doing and letting somebody else take over my position on the school committee, it makes perfect sense to me, and it makes perfect sense to the people that I've talked to in this town that are supporting me. Nobody's questioning me in terms of, unless there's a political motivation as there was from another question, nobody's questioning me as to what my motives are. And that, to me, that's the most important thing. I want to help this town any way I can. I think I'm capable of doing it. I assume that's why John's doing it. And no offense, but no one's saying, should he not come out of retirement to run for an office? He has every right to do that. And I have every right to try to serve my town in the best way I can. And that's my intellectual answer to you. I'm sorry if it's not sufficient, but that's what it is.
Next question. Yes, sir.
John Sullivan. Paul kind of directed you, you got shortchanged initially as you made your opening remarks. When did you move into town and what have you been involved with since you've been there?
Sure, thank you. I moved here in 2007. My wife and two children, both my daughters attended the South Elementary School. Since I became a resident of the town, I immediately became involved in coaching and supporting the youth programs. My daughters were both active, and I wanted to be involved, and I met some wonderful people around town. It was been a great experience. I made some great friends. And since that time, Sue Sullivan and I actually, I was appointed to serve with her on the Hingham Development Industrial Committee, and some wonderful people on the committee. And the reason why I did it is because I wanted to get involved, and that's what I did. And I had a great experience. I learned a lot about the town. I learned a lot about how government is run. And when I decided to run for school committee, I will tell you that when I decided to run, there were only one person running, I believe, for 2 open seats. And so at the time, I said, well, if no one else wants to run, I'll put my name in. I'm a volunteer, and I'm doing whatever I can to help this town. And I tell you, it's been the most enriching experience that I've had. I said, I've met so many wonderful people. My colleagues on the school committee are wonderful people. They volunteer lots of time, and believe me, I have a lot of time to give. And in those meetings, we followed the field projects, we followed planning board. I was in virtually all those meetings. So I think I've demonstrated I have the time. And then at some point in time, I took a look at how government was run. And I thought I could make an impact. I thought I could make it better. I wanted it to be transparent, I wanted it to be accessible, and I wanted to return a atmosphere of collegiality to the Board of Selectmen. And people have told me that it seems to have it's digressed off of that. If you want to build consensus, as we do in this town to get things done, to accomplish good things like we do, we need to have a consensus. We need to work together. And so I decided to do it. And I'm very happy to do it. And one thing that I can guarantee you're going to have a strong independent voice on that Board of Selectmen, and that's going to be me. Because I'm going to do what's in the best interest of the people in this town. I've talked to people all the time. I enjoy talking to them. I enjoy going around the neighborhoods to meet with them. And the bottom line is that it's a fresh set of eyes to make Hingham a better place than it already is. And you know what? I'm willing to learn. Nobody has all the answers. John and I don't have all the answers. We need to work with people in advisory, people in town government, people in the school committee. And I look forward to it. I relish it here. And I'm 100% committed to it.
In the interests of balancing the time, John Asher, why don't you take a couple minutes to speak to an issue or a priority that the questions haven't addressed yet?
Well, let's see. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the development of commercial revenue in South Shore Park. Obviously, 3A and downtown Hingham are part of what the HDIC is also doing. Town meeting this year will consider an update basically to Chapter 43D filing, which would make South Shore Park particularly a priority development site, which has a lot of benefits for the town in terms of facilitated grants from the state and other support that really kind of hang the shingle out that says Hingham is a good place in which to do business. And I would just repeat what I said very quickly in my opening statement. I think we all enjoy really high caliber service delivery here in Hingham and excellent schools. The question in my mind and what I've been focusing on in the years that I've been in advisory is how do we continue to maintain that and not burden residential property taxpayers to such an extent that it really becomes an almost impossible decision. My answer is low-impact commercial development, particularly in the South Shore Park, which is zoned commercially and really meets all the requirements for characterization as a priority development site. So I'll make a pitch for that, and hopefully the folks here in the room and at town meeting will decide to approve the article that corrects the 43D, the application already having been filed with the state.
Thank you. Yes.
Beth Walker. I was wondering how, if you look at the population of the town, which is growing in the senior citizens crew, which is what is mainly here in the Clinton House room. Right now, the budget for the town is about 50% plus for the school committee. Very minuscule amount for the senior citizens. What do you as selectmen think with this growing senior citizen population you could do for the senior citizens? And still keeping the budget within restraints because many of them are on fixed incomes and now unable, as the tax rate goes up, to keep up, especially with no interest on their money in banks, to be able to stay and live here.
And the question again was what each candidate's priorities or vision is for the senior citizen population of Hingham, especially bearing in mind the income restraints on many senior citizens. John Asher, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, it's an important question for the town because over 1/4 of the town's citizens are age 60 and older, and it is the fastest growing age group in town. So a very important question. I would say that one of the things that can be done and has been done, when I was on advisory, we increased the budget, even in a tough budget time, for the Elder Services Tax Work-Off Program. And actually, in the period of time, 2007 through 2012, I believe, it has quintupled. There's about $60,000 now that is budgeted for citizens, and now not all have to be elderly, to work under the direction of Elder Services, perform service for the town, and get $1,000 credit against property tax. I think that's something the town is doing. Actually, we've implemented, town meeting last year passed a similar tax work-off program for veterans under the Federal Valor Act. And we've had 4 veterans that have worked under that this year who will also get similar credit, but have done work for the town to receive that credit. I think the other thing is to really look at what is already there. The circuit breaker, and Representative Bradley sends around each year a glossary that basically describes what is available, means-based assistance that actually is available from the state in terms of circuit breakers relative to property tax and income. And I would say that's clearly another route to help folks of limited means age independent. I think finally what the Board of Selectmen talked about at Town Forum in terms of property tax amelioration, if you will, associated with the meals tax and other vehicles that we all benefit from, not targeted specifically age-wise, but that would address some of the tax increases that we see based on some of the decisions previous town meetings have made relative to the buildings and the borrowings associated with them.
Paul Gannon?
Thank you. Well, I know John had mentioned some things the town has done prior to either one of us being elected, and that it is great that that they do that, and I applaud them. And I know that the town meeting it was approved, and I do appreciate that the rising population of seniors. I'm not sure, Beth, that everybody's considers themselves in that bracket, but so. But in any event, in terms of what we do. You know, I think it's a good step in terms of offering tax relief. I mean, there are other proposals, and the Board of Selectmen should consider everything, as I know they've done. And I would look at it year to year in terms of what I can accomplish, and on top of the fact that the meals tax is being allocated towards reducing the effect of the tax increases, and the levy issue with the $400,000 also is a benefit as well. I will point out that. You got to be careful when you start talking about 50% of the budget going in a certain way, because I know, Beth, I know you've been at a lot of meetings over the years. A lot of these are mandates, you know, with special ed and so forth. A couple of years ago, we had a hit of almost $500,000 that we had no control of, and we worked with Board of Selectmen, we worked with advisory to minimize the impact of that, and we're continuing to work on that. So I just want people to understand that just because the budget is a certain number, and I think it was 43 million, I believe, it's because of all the contracts, it's all the mandates. We have vast majority of the employees in this town, and they have contracts, and there's mandates with special ed. I will say this, that I see Laura Burns here. I worked with Laura Burns and Linda Port in a great committee at Schreier on a special education working group, and one of our goals was to help, two goals actually, to try to put some money aside in case we ever have this problem again, so we don't have to take away from the elderly, so to speak, or anybody really, lay anybody off, and that's going to be in front of town meeting. And also a way to get more money to pay for the high-end cost of these out-of-district kids that, the special needs kids, and we want to do the best by them. We want to take care of them, and we're just asking the state to help us. So there are a lot of ways to help everybody, not just the elderly, but also the elderly, to minimize the costs that are involved, but some of them we're just not going to be able to avoid.
Eric, could I add something to that?
Surely.
The budget for the school committee, when I first joined advisory, I learned a lot in sessions that Dr. Gallo and the school committee held, and one of the questions that I had was how could we address something that is hard to manage to budgetarily, which were the special education out-of-district tuitions and transportation costs. And so the committee, Paul, that you sat on, and Laura Burns, actually is a result of discussions that I had with Dr. Gallo that I included in the advisory committee report for town meeting 2012, really suggesting that Hingham and other similarly situated communities talk together and kind of work to, if you will, lobby the legislature more effectively in terms of more timely payments and more full funding for things like circuit breaker, which have been underfunded, and Hingham taxpayers end up covering the delta. So I would say I think good things are underway. I'm hopeful that they will result in a more manageable situation budgetarily to make sure we can address the needs that students have, but do it in a way that works within our own budgetary process.
Just a quick follow-up.
Paul, do you want to take a moment
Sure.
to follow up?
Just to follow up. And John's point is a good one in the sense that we want to lobby harder and better. I know that one of the meetings we just had with the school committee was trying to get a consensus as how we could lobby either through a number of communities together, strengthen numbers, to work together to get the legislature to pass things like increased funding with the circuit breakers. The reality is that there's legislation up there, and we have been, and I know Linda and Laura have been the main forces behind this. They have been working hard with the leadership, Garrett Bradley, and our elected officials to try to get this thing moving along. There are many players involved. The chairman, I believe, is a woman out of Belmont. She has her own legislation in there. So the members of the school committee and the working group have been really interested in this issue. We've been working hard over the last couple of years. And I'm hopefully, although it's difficult to get money sometimes out of the legislature, hopefully we can find some money and some relief for not only the elderly, but everybody in town.
We have time for one more question to our candidates for selectmen. And I'll be the one to ask it. What is each of your vision for the Hingham Mutual building if the town goes ahead and purchases it? Paul, let's start with you.
Sure. That's a great question, by the way, because in my campaigning, I've spoken to people in the Rec Commission, and I've spoken to some folks that are from town government that are involved in this issue. I think, first of all, there's a need, and how we actually finalize it, if we get to that point, has to be discussed. But that building, I think it's like 55,000 square feet, it's 12 acres. One of the questions is how much, obviously, how much? That's the first question. And how much is it going to cost to rehab it? I heard it's a beautiful building, it's got a lot of space. We have a tenant in there now who would be obviously a paying tenant, so that would be very helpful. And so my hope is that if we get some of these answers and they're favorable, that we might be able to move in that direction, because I think for a lot of reasons, that town hall area is overwhelmed, and the seniors need more space, and I know the rec department, at least in part, needs some more space. So it could be a win-win if we can get this thing done.
John Asher, your vision for the Hingham Mutual building?
Well, I'm very excited by it, frankly, because I think it does a lot of things that would otherwise be focused on making some major changes to town hall, which even in the relatively short time that I've lived in Hingham, I've become attached to. So I'm hopeful that this negotiation can come to closure, because I think it would give rec a lot more room that it could use. I think it would enable, as Paul alluded to, the senior center to consolidate, get some more room, and the police department as well, which now sits somewhat separated, and I think to that extent less effective. I think also tactically, it would make for easier parking at Town Hall, and I think the folks that are on Burr Road would sit and applaud this as well. So I hope the negotiation is a successful one. I think we can benefit. I would also acknowledge, as Paul alluded to, that it won't be free, the acquisition of the building and the refurbishment of it, to make sure that it really provides full function for the rec department and other tenants.
Please join me in thanking our two candidates for selectmen, John Asher and Paul Gannon. The next office that we're going to hear from is the Recreation Commission. There is one seat open on the Recreation Commission this year. There are two candidates. One of them, Robert Keyes, sends his regrets for not being able to join us for this forum. The other one, Sarah Malia, was able to join us, and I welcome Sarah to the podium.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Sarah Amelia. I'm candidate for the Recreation Commission. I really would I'm running for this position because the rec is extremely important to me, to my family, and because of my commitment to the town. Moved to Hingham in 1979. It wasn't my choice then. I was 3 years old. I've lived here pretty much my whole life. Graduated from Hingham High in 1994, as did my husband, sitting back there. And after graduating from Hingham High, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, so I did leave town for a little while. And came after Penn, I went to BC Law School, graduated there in 2002. And I worked as an attorney for 10 years. And for the last 5 years, where I worked in Hingham for Drow and Taccio and Morgan. And while I was there, I went back at night and got my master's in tax law from BU Law. Finished that in 2010. While pregnant with my second child and raising my first child. Now I have 3 kids. They're 6, 4, and 3. And they keep me pretty busy, so I decided to take a little time to be home with them. But I really love serving the community, and so for the last 2 years, I have used some of my spare time to serve as the treasurer of the Hingham Nursery School. And I'm still in that role. I'm going to continue for the next year. They've asked me to stay on, which I am excited about. And I also do a lot of advocating for kids with food allergies. Actually, my son was diagnosed with a peanut allergy about 2 years ago, and so I started a sort of local support group on Facebook, which is called the Hingham Food Allergy Network, and I've contributed to the journal on the topic. And so I really try to use as much time as I can giving back to the community, and the rec is another way I hope to continue that. Thanks, sorry.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'll go ahead and ask the first question. What changes do you see at the Rec Commission that ought to be made there, and that you would pursue if you were elected?
Well, I think what the rec is doing currently is really exciting and interesting. There's a huge change coming for some of the people who have attended the dance program at the community center. Some of those teachers are going to be moving over to the rec for next year, and those teachers are really excited. My 2 daughters take those classes now. Those teachers are really excited about the move and expanding their dance school. I think Mark has done an excellent job working with those teachers, getting them excited to come work for the rec. And I really think the many programs that they have there are so vibrant. I would just really hope to support Mark in continuing the excellent track that he's on, and the new, fresh ideas that he's bringing. And I also think a lot of what the rec does, there are a lot of senior exercise classes and things, and the proximity to, with the senior center and town hall. I think there's a nice commitment there, and should the rec move in with the senior center, I think that would be an exciting opportunity to really continue that trend, to make sure that the rec is available to and used by all ages in town.
And the question, I'm sorry, Sarah, the question was about the optimal strategy for managing the fields that the town currently operates.
I think it's hard to say. I think ultimately it would be nice to be able to consolidate all the fields management under rec, because in terms of assessing fees and permits and things for running the fields, it really would be nice to have just one body to go to for that. I know that it's hard. I mean, the schools need to control their own fields management for obvious reasons. They have all the different teams using them just to compete at the school level, so they don't want to, be sharing that necessarily with the PTUSA 2-year-old soccer program in the optimal hours. So I understand why it's divided. I do think it's something worth looking at, possibly trying to streamline it. But, I guess that's my answer. Thanks.
Sarah, do you feel that the town has enough fields right now, or do you see a need for more?
I think the town has a lot of fields right now, but I do know that there's always competition for the space. I think, they've done a really nice job over at Ward Street, and the high school fields look amazing. It would be interesting to see if there are possibilities to develop some more field space over by the Hingham Mutual Building. I don't know. Again, there's so many questions around it. That's so close to Bear Cove, with the conservation aspect. I'm not sure if that's feasible. Certainly, if it was, I think that would be another nice space in town, because the other baseball fields are right, and football fields are right there, and to make it an even more vibrant area of town, I think would be great.
Other questions for Sarah Amelia for the Recreation Commission? Well, Sarah, thank you for being here this afternoon.
Sure.
A late-breaking question.
Thought I was off the hook.
The question was around maintaining and restoring the parks that Hingham currently has.
Yeah, certainly, I think it would be a very interesting thing for the rec to possibly pursue. I mean, the rec certainly has a huge base of young people who are already attending the rec, who are involved there, and maybe that's a group that we could tap to try to help achieve that. Who knows, between that, and we could work even possibly with some of the scouts in town. I don't know. It would be certainly interesting to pursue. I don't know what the rec's current budget is for forest management right now, and whether or not it's even been something historically that the rec has undertaken, but certainly it'd be something I would be open to looking at, and trying to see if there's budget for it, and if not, maybe we can rally some volunteers.
Passive recreation should not mean let's not use it. And by the way, you had me at Tranquility Grove.
I'm out there actually quite a bit. There's some coyotes, you gotta watch out.
Please join me again in thanking Sarah for being here this afternoon. And our last office that we're going to hear from this afternoon is the Planning Board. There is one seat open on the Planning Board this year. There is one candidate, Walter Sullivan, so please join me in welcoming Walter Sullivan to the podium.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. At first, at the outset, I'd like to, on behalf of all the candidates, thank the Hinghamtown Republican Committee, the chair, Eric Haskell, and also the chair of the event, Laura Marwell, for making this opportunity available to the candidates and also the folks that are here and the folks at home. I am a real estate development lawyer. I've been practicing law since 1989. I have a small civil real estate practice in Norwell. My wife and I and our 3 children have resided here in Hingham since 2000. My children are now 18, 17, and 15, getting a little bit older, and so I thought maybe I had a little bit more time involved to participate more in town events. When we first moved to Hingham, I was on the Open Space Acquisition Committee. I did about 5 years on that committee. I enjoyed that very much. I then took some time away from municipal service. I was involved in the governance of my children's school, Derby Academy. I was on the Board of Trustees there for 9 years, 5 years as president. My youngest just graduated there from the 8th grade there this past year. I saw that they had a planning board representative available because Paul Healy had become elected as selectman. I put my name in for it and was appointed happily. So I've been serving on the planning board since last summer, probably the past 9 months now. It is a lot of work, but I have enjoyed it. It's been a learning experience. I think something that's been alluded to that is very important that the planning board and all the boards get involved in here in Hingham is the threat of 40B. It's a true threat to this town, and it's something that we need to work on cooperatively. The planning board's role in it is in the development of the master plan. This town can be more proactive with 40B by promoting local initiatives, as John Asher alluded to, that we can select programs that we support as opposed to having angry or more aggressive 40Bs. And for purpose of disclosure, I am a direct abutter to the current project on Main Street. So nobody can say I didn't disclose it. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Walter Sullivan, running for Planning Committee? Yes, Laura.
Walter, can you elaborate a little bit on how you see the master plan changing or being updated?
And the question was how Walter sees the master plan changing or being updated in the coming years.
One of the things that the town has, the planning board especially, has spent some time on is the zoning map that some of the candidates have talked about in promoting commercial development in certain areas, targeted areas for the town, that will help support the town with tax revenue. Also, what I indicated too is the town now takes the position that it's at 10% and that 40B is not applicable to it. And although I support that position, we haven't been as successful at the administrative level on appeals at supporting that. DHCD doesn't agree with us. If we had a master plan which put focus on and demonstrated to DHCD that in fact we are willing to work on local initiatives to support affordable housing, we would have more opportunity to resist 40B development here in town. So that's something that the planning board has sought to update.
Other questions? Walter, how would you describe the planning board's relationship with the community planning department?
I am a land use lawyer, and Hingham is one of the few towns of which I'm aware, Eric, where the planning board and zoning board serve cooperatively in certain special permit applications, utilizing the same staff. And I would suggest that the relationship between that department seems to be very smooth.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Edna. And the question was how to manage development in Hingham, particularly South Hingham, in a way that preserves the village, the existing village atmosphere of our town.
You know, and I'm not exactly specific, I'm not sure specifically what you're alluding to, but I guess the way I'll first address it with respect to the business area along Whiting Street and Derby Street. And I think, you know, I think careful growth is very important. And I think we have to promote the commercial growth that's there. It's zoned for that. But we really have to be very careful as planning board to make sure that the infrastructure can accommodate the traffic. There are a host of concerns that make that somewhat difficult. There's a state road involved and things like that. But the planning board, and again, this is based on my 9-month service, is very mindful of all of those concerns. I mean, I think that intersection on Gardner Street and Cushing by the Dunkin' Donuts is probably the most dangerous in the state. It is being looked at. Unfortunately, it's a state road. The state is responsible. The state is taking control of it, and not surprisingly, it's taking a long time. But that is a very difficult turn. Everybody on the planning board, every applicant that comes before the planning board for development along that corridor has to deal with those traffic issues. Continued road count. In fact, as was done at the shipyard, the new Lexus dealership that's going there is going to be required not only to have a traffic count before they can develop it, but an ongoing one to support that what is actually there is sufficient. So I guess broadly, to get back to to be more responsive, is I think we have to enforce the zoning that's there and be very mindful of it. And with respect to residential development along Main Street, again, I think the response is the same. We have to enforce the zoning code. Thank you.
And the question was whether Walter believes that Hingham is at the 10% affordable housing threshold under 40B.
Okay, purpose of full disclosure, I'm a direct abutter to a 20-unit 40B project on South Main Street, on Main Street in South Hingham. And I agree with what Mr. Asher alluded to, that I don't think DHCD, a state agency, is going to support our position on 40B, on the 10% threshold. But I think we have to go to the judiciary. When Linden Ponds was developed, it was with the absolute specific understanding that there would be, quote-unquote, never be another 40B in this town. And that was approved in part based on that representation, and I think the town had a right to rely upon it. We're not going to win at the DHCD, or it seems unlikely. In fact, more recently on this proposal on Main Street, DHCD has overruled us on that issue. But I think we need to go to the court system. And I think it's worthwhile, because if we do not get credit for 100% of Linden Ponds, there's going to be a lot more of these projects.
So, Walter, let me follow up on that. What do you envision when you say that the next step is to go to the judiciary?
The ZBA took the position that we're at 10% and wrote DHCD about that. DHCD, after a couple of months, responded and said, we don't agree. We can't appeal that ruling. It's not interlocutory until the hearing is closed on the specific project. Once that is closed, the town can then appeal that ruling of DHCD, and it's my hope that they do, because to Al's question, I believe we are at 10%. I think Linden Ponds, the issue on Linden Ponds, as I understand it through my research, is that the state is not considering them as apartments because they're sort of a hybrid because of the significant deposit people put down. But if they are apartments, and I think the argument is that they are, then we should get credit for all of them. And if we get credit for all of them, then we can control whether or not there's any more affordable housing.
So the question was whether adding a new wing to the Lincoln School apartments would help mitigate some of the issues that the town's encountering with respect to 40B.
Absolutely. In our master plan, in the current revisions that will be before the town, we have indicated that we were going to promote more local initiatives or friendly 40Bs. DHCD guidelines provide that if you have a plan and it's identified in your master plan and specific that you're going to promote certain LIPs, that you will buy yourself sometimes up to 3 years or 18 months before any more 40Bs can be before you. And it actually causes the ones that are currently before pending to drop to the back of the line. They have to refile. And so it's that type of proactive planning that I think this town really needs to look at. And that's what the planning board is looking at with respect to the master plan. Thank you.
So the question was how Walter sees the town addressing Hingham's village streetscape, especially with respect to new development and to neglected properties.
You know, my wife and I moved to Hingham because we chose to live here because it's so beautiful, and we live on Main Street. So I'm certainly mindful of all that. But I'm a lawyer, and people have property rights. So what it comes down to is a balancing. It really does. And you really almost have to take it on a case-by-case basis. There are all kinds of legal arguments about when a property is abandoned, whether they lose the right to rebuild. And those are the things that the planning board has to look at on a specific case-by-case basis. I would suggest to you that based on my little less than a year's service on the planning board, all 5 members of the board and the alternate consider all of those things very carefully, and everybody is very mindful of the historic and village character of the entire town.
Walter, thank you for being with us this afternoon. Before we close, I would like to acknowledge the folks who helped put this program together, in particular Laura Marwill, Helga Jorgensen, and Jerry Seelan, all of whom are here. And I would also like to announce again the next meeting of the Hingham Republican Town Committee, where we will be hosting Jim Sturgis, the Executive Director of the Pioneer Institute, to speak about the Common Core issue. Any member of the public who's interested to attend that meeting is welcome to. It is Sunday, April 27th at 7 o'clock. At the 99 Restaurant at 428 Lincoln Street, that is Route 3A at Beale Street. Thank you, everybody, for coming today, and have a good night.